Okay, hello and welcome back. This is the Sunday School lesson, part one. And I'm doing this a little different today because of a few things that's happened to me this week. And I have the personal belief that that when that things that we as mere mortals perceive as synchronicity is often God whacking us upside the head and telling us to, get with it, to pay attention more. And that's happened this week with this particular lesson. Or should I say, with aspects of this lesson. This wasn't actually specifically covered in the Sunday school lesson as presented, but it was covered in the reading. And so I came forward and decided to do this and to really kind of discuss Judas Iscariot in this lesson. So this 3 times this week I've been reminded of Judas Iscariot. The first time was, of course, in the lesson. Second time, so at my church we have congregation members who give what are called talks. They get up in sacrament meeting and they talk for between 5 minutes and 20 minutes to everybody around. And it's very good. It's good to learn that, actually. It's a good skill to learn. But it also helps us study, so because we have to address everybody else. And the topic that this woman had was betrayal and faith, and of course she talked about Judas Iscariot. She also was quick to note that she's been divorced 3 times, so it was a very easy topic for her to do, betrayal. But it was very hard to do the topic without being bitter, so make of that what you will. So that was the second time I was reminded of Judas, and then the third time was at my work. I work as a janitor, and we're in summer cleaning now. And I was in the library at the high school that we're currently cleaning, and just glanced over at the library, and I found the Book of Judas. So I'm gonna start. So that was enough to kick me upside the head and say, "This means something. You better discuss this." And, I'll be honest, I don't know exactly why I need to discuss this, but I have faith that I should discuss this. So, we'll start with the story of Judas, specifically the betrayal. So, there are several interesting aspects to note, but it's, so at the Last Supper, we have Christ stating to his apostles, one of you will betray me. And everybody was like, was it me? Is it me? Is it me? And Christ said, he who takes of the sop will be the one who betrays me. And Judas took of the sop. It's like dip and ate. I'm actually not entirely sure what exactly happened there, whether Christ took the piece of bread, dipped it, and gave it to Judas, or whether Christ dipped the bread and ate it, and then Judas dipped right after him. Regardless, it was clearly indicated that Judas would betray him, but the apostles apparently didn't understand that. And so, Christ turned to Judas and says, whatever you're going to do it quickly. And even at the time, the apostles were thinking it had something to do with buying supplies they needed or something like that, since Judas was in charge of the money for the apostles. And Judas immediately goes out and betrays Christ. Now there are a few different ideas as to what exactly happened and why he did it. So I'm going to go over 3 of them as covered, and I'll explain a little bit about each one. So the first one is, so far as I know, only a theory, and it's this idea that Judas believed that did believe in the divinity of Christ. He was very much convinced of it, and he, was very much all in favor of it. He felt Christ was doing well, and he very much believed it. But he also believed that he wasn't doing as much as he needed to do. So by betraying Christ, he would get Christ to essentially go out and act upon, would show his power basically to the people. And he basically, as somebody explained it to me, he believed that he knew more than Christ, and as such, he thought this was the best thing to do. And ultimately, when he realized that, oh, this is gone much further, much more wrong than I thought it would, that's when he realized the extent of his betrayal and he killed himself. Like I said, that's one theory. I don't know how valid it is. A second one, this one's kind of interesting. So this is the book of Mark. So a woman, I want to say it was Mary, anointed Christ's feet at the Last Supper, and she used some very expensive oils to do so that she had saved up for. And in, I think, all the Gospels except for the Gospel of John, it says that the apostles objected to this use of the funds, and saying that the funds could be used for better things, for giving, the money could be given to the poor or something like that. In the book of John, I believe, is where it actually says that it was Judas who raised this objection, not the apostles. So, interesting little distinction there. But in the book of Mark, this is in the Joseph Smith translation of it, there is a single line which states that after Christ had rebuked the apostles, or, for saying that this could be given to the poor, that Judas himself felt slighted by this, and he got offended by him doing that. And then, so what some people think is that this feeling of being offended may have led him to betray Christ. And then, that's when he realized what he'd done and killed himself. Now this, and I know a lot of people who would say, well, is that really a good enough reason to kind of leave and depart from, a life of being an apostle? And I think, I can put this in fair terms, that being offended, a lot of people have been offended by, what have been relatively minor things, and have left, the church, left, the gospel, just completely stopped going to church, period. I know the records in my church record many, many people who have done this, historically and even modern times, and I'd be willing to bet that you probably know people who got offended at, small things that happened at church, or something somebody said at church or something like that, and then they never came back. And, yes, I could easily see somebody getting offended and then, just being very rash about something, and then, regretting it, and, essentially what happened with Judas. So the third actually comes from the book of Judas, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the book of Judas, because, I had heard of it before I saw it in the library, but I didn't know too much about it, so I read the introduction of the book of Judas. I've not actually read the book of Judas, so I don't know, I only know what it said in the introduction. So apparently in the 1970s, in a cave in northern Egypt, they found this record, Book of Judas. It's, when translated, it's about 30 pages long. Or in the book, I should say, it's about 30 pages, is the full length of the Book of Judas. Apparently, it got a little confusing because they talked about Coptic text and Greek text and so on, so I'm not even sure offhand what language it was initially written in. I'm presuming the Greek, but I don't really know offhand. But I think that's probably a little immaterial. But it was translated as the Book of Judas. So the parchment itself was from about about 200 AD, about the 2nd century AD, I should say. So between 100 AD and 200 AD. Which doesn't mean that Judas didn't write it. It just means that this copy of it was made in that time period. It also apparently it's reference early church, an early member of an early Christian in about 180 AD references the Book of Judas. So it was around. Now, offhand, just looking at it purely empirically, it's pretty much impossible to tell whether Judas actually wrote it or not. It claims to be written by Judas. That's pretty much the most we can say about it. Offhand, just my personal belief from what little I know about it is that he probably didn't write this. And the reason I say that he probably didn't is that there were a lot of books written at this time that claimed to have been written by people in Christ's time, whether apostles or disciples of Christ from the time, and they were in fact written by early church members, either to kind of give more credence to their own words and belief, or they were written by detractors who were trying to, give the church a bad name. And it's the motivation behind why these were specifically written is just theoretical. We don't really know. But, there were a lot of books at the time that have been shown to be not written by the people that they claimed wrote it. So, I think it's quite likely that somebody else wrote it and claimed it was written by Judas Iscariot. So it paints him in much better light as you would expect, something that features Judas as the writer. It paints Judas as really kind of the hero of the whole thing and not, an evil traitor. In it he states, it states that Judas himself absolutely believed in the divinity of Christ, which he was an apostle. That's really not that big of a surprise. In the introduction, they made it sound like this was a really, really big deal, but it doesn't sound at all surprising to me. I don't know why they thought that was a big deal. But it also states that Jesus himself asked Judas to betray him, and this was done for his own divinity, or to kind of bring about the events, the atonement, and the other events that were brought about due to the basically him being imprisoned and killed by the Jewish people. I, not having read it, but my first question would be, if that's the case, why did Judas then go and kill himself? So for several reasons, I do not believe that this was one written by Judas, nor do I believe it's really an accurate look at those events. I will give you one other reason for me not believing in that, and that was when I looked at the back of the book, a reviewer had said, this completely changes how we look at Christianity, which, whenever there's a sweeping statement about anything that says, this completely changes everything, I become very suspicious about how accurate or how good of a source it is. It's just so many times, so many cases, there are things that are supposed to completely revolutionize everything we know, and it turns out to be a fraudulent claim or a fraudulent source. So yeah, that's a quick look at kind of Judas Iscariot, his betrayal, and kind of 3 thoughts and theories about why he did it. Speaking honestly, we really don't know. Perhaps if the Book of Judas is actually an accurate record of him, that can give us a clue, but if and when it's shown to be an accurate record, I'll go back to it and look at it. Until then, I'm going to doubt the authenticity, I'm afraid. So, we really don't know what motivated Judas to do what he did, whether it was just him being offended, whether he actually thought he was helping Christ and this would bring about kind of, show Christ to be, the Savior, which to a certain extent it actually did, but not how Judas expected it to go, or whether he was actually asked of Christ to do it, which, quite frankly, I don't buy it. I'll just leave it at that. I do not buy it. So yeah, his motivations remain a mystery, I'm afraid, and I think there's probably a valuable lesson about being faithful. Are we going to be the faithful person who sticks by Christ? Are we going to be like Peter or John, who went out of their way to see Christ and stick by him? Or are we going to be like Judas and betray him? So, anyway, that's part one. A quick look at Judas Iscariot and the betrayal. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe if you like this. I will see you in the next video. Bye.